It was just after midnight when the first signs appeared. Somewhere deep inside Russian-held territory, a convoy of trucks rumbled along a cracked rural road, their headlights dimmed, their cargo heavy with destruction. The vehicles carried crates of ammunition, artillery shells, and rockets worth $500 million. They were destined for a depot, one of Russia's most heavily guarded stockpiles, supplying frontline troops in eastern Ukraine. But unknown to Moscow, Ukrainian intelligence had already set the perfect trap. For weeks, Kiev's spies, aided by drones, satellites, and even resistance networks operating inside occupied zones, had been mapping every movement. The Russians thought they were safe, hidden behind kilometers of reinforced bunkers and guarded fences. But Ukraine knew every shift change, every delivery schedule, every blind spot in the security perimeter. The plan was simple in design but terrifying in execution. Let the depot fill to maximum capacity, then erase it from the map with a single, devastating strike. Ukrainian special units had been waiting in silence. Drones flew high above, invisible to the naked eye, transmitting live feeds back to command. The target was ready. Dozens of Russian trucks were parked in neat rows, offloading crates into cavernous storage bunkers. Soldiers stood smoking by the gates, confident in their stronghold. They had no idea their minutes were numbered. At precisely 12:47 a.m., the order came. A wave of long-range precision missiles, guided by drones, cut across the night sky like streaks of lightning. The first missile slammed into the heart of the depot, followed instantly by another. The ground convulsed with a thunderous roar that rolled for miles. Fireballs erupted one after another, each explosion feeding the next. Ammunition stacked in underground chambers ignited like a volcano, spewing shock waves into the darkness. The Russians, who moments earlier had been chatting casually, were thrown to the ground, their world torn apart in a cascade of steel and flame. From villages miles away, windows shattered as the earth shook. Locals thought an earthquake had struck. Instead, they watched the night sky turn orange, with flames climbing hundreds of feet high, blotting out the stars. For nearly 30 minutes, the depot burned uncontrollably. Secondary explosions erupted as tanks of fuel and missile warheads detonated. The cost of destruction was staggering. More than $500 million worth of Russia's military lifeline reduced to ash. But the strike wasn't just about the depot. It was bait, and Russia walked right into it. The Ukrainians had deliberately timed the attack when Russian commanders would send reinforcements to the scene. And that's exactly what happened. Within minutes, Moscow scrambled helicopters, armored convoys, and rapid response teams to secure what remained. But Ukraine had anticipated the move. Hidden artillery batteries, precision drones, and mobile missile teams were already locked onto the approach routes. As Russian reinforcements sped toward the burning depot, the trap snapped shut. One after another, armored columns were ambushed. Drones dropped explosives with pinpoint accuracy onto supply trucks. Artillery fire rained down on convoys, scattering soldiers in panic. A Ka-52 attack helicopter circled low, trying to suppress Ukrainian firepower, but it was struck mid-air by a Stinger missile. Flames engulfed its fuselage as it spiraled into the fields below. The Russians thought they were coming to save a depot. Instead, they drove into a kill zone. Part 2 of the operation unfolded with brutal precision. Ukrainian units released swarm drones, cheap but deadly, programmed to hunt targets on roads and open fields. Every explosion was broadcast back to Kiev, where commanders watched the plan succeed beyond expectations. Dozens of Russian vehicles burned, ammunition scattered across highways, soldiers abandoning equipment in desperate attempts to survive. By dawn, the once mighty depot was nothing but a smoking crater. Satellite images later confirmed that an entire square kilometer had been obliterated. Blackened wreckage stretched as far as the eye could see. Russian propaganda channels went silent at first, then scrambled to downplay the disaster. But the damage was impossible to hide. It was one of the single most expensive blows to Moscow's war effort, not just in money, but in morale. The strike sent shockwaves far beyond the battlefield. Russian soldiers on the front lines began rationing ammunition within days, whispering that their endless supply chain was no longer untouchable. Ukrainian troops, on the other hand, fought with renewed energy, knowing their enemy was bleeding. Western allies hailed the strike as proof of Ukraine's ingenuity, using precision, patience, and intelligence to outwit a much larger foe. Yet what happened next proved even more critical. Russia, humiliated, launched a furious counterattack. Missile barrages streaked across Ukrainian skies, targeting power plants, rail lines, and suspected command centers. In Moscow, anger boiled. Officials vowed severe consequences, calling the strike an act of terrorism. But these threats only confirmed what Ukraine already knew. The strike had rattled the Kremlin to its core. Behind closed doors, Russian generals argued, some insisted on shifting ammunition depots deeper into Russian territory, away from Ukrainian reach. Others demanded harsher crackdowns on local collaborators who might be leaking intelligence. But moving depots meant longer supply routes, slower deliveries, and frontline shortages. Ukraine had done more than destroy $500 million in munitions. They had forced Russia into a logistical nightmare. Meanwhile, resistance networks inside occupied zones celebrated quietly. Many had risked their lives to provide Ukraine with maps, photographs, and coordinates. For them, the burning depot was not just a military victory, it was proof that their sacrifices mattered. Messages filtered back through secret channels. We did it. They thought they were untouchable, but we showed them. The event also marked a turning point in psychological warfare. Russian soldiers, once confident their rear bases were safe, now lived in constant fear. Every convoy could be tracked. Every depot could explode without warning. Drones buzzed overhead like ghostly predators, and the sound alone was enough to send shivers through the ranks. Days later, videos surfaced online. Massive explosions lighting up the night sky. Russian troops fleeing in chaos, flames swallowing everything in sight. The footage spread rapidly, shared across social media, international news outlets, and even within Russia itself. For many Russians, it was their first unfiltered glimpse of the true cost of war. Ukraine's trap was more than a tactical success. It was a message to Moscow. No matter how much money, weapons, or manpower you pour into this war, we will find your weakness, and we will strike. And for every depot you build, for every convoy you send, we will be waiting. The $500 million depot lay in ruins, but its destruction carried a weight far beyond numbers. It exposed the vulnerability of a superpower and the resilience of a nation fighting for survival. In the quiet aftermath, as the fires smoldered and Russian officials scrambled to explain the unexplainable, one truth became undeniable. Ukraine had turned the tables. What was once seen as David against Goliath now looked like something far more dangerous for Moscow. An enemy who knew how to use intelligence, patience, and precision to bleed the giant dry. And somewhere on the Ukrainian front, soldiers huddled in muddy trenches, exhausted but smiling faintly, knowing that the depot strike had bought them time, hope, and a reminder that this war, however brutal, was not beyond their reach to change. The story didn't end that night. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the conflict, one where every supply depot, every convoy, and every hidden warehouse became a potential target. Russia's lifeline was under siege, and Ukraine had shown the world that even in the darkest nights, a carefully set trap could ignite a fire powerful enough to change the course of a war.